Hello and welcome. I'm Exit Light and this is my podcast. Hello, guys. We are having a fun topic tonight, which is Civil War hauntings. And this is one of my favorite topics. And I know this is one of Jory's favorite topics. And Jory is my guest host today. Hello, Jory.
Hello, everybody.
Um, Stick around because during this podcast, you guys are going to see my own photos from my own haunted Civil War experience where I did catch a ghost. So that makes me very excited for this podcast because I can't wait to show that part. How about you, Jor? You got anything like that?
I am the closest I've gotten to anything Civil War-ish was so where I live, ironically, was also just a few miles away from an actual Civil War confrontation, which you don't think Civil War when you think Arizona. But if you look at the Civil War, it actually stretched all the way into California. Alcatraz actually started as a Civil War fort. So there's a battlefield, not a battlefield, but a skirmish site just outside of Casa Grande called Picacho Peak.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to go there and watch the Civil War reenactment. And then when I went with you and my wife to New Orleans, Louisiana, we stayed in the Hotel Provincial, which was used as a Civil War hospital. So
yes,
that was fun.
That is fun. It's on the tour of haunted sites.
Yeah.
And Maya and I had a spooky experience there where we saw a handprint. Well, it wasn't there, and then it started to appear, and then it got darker and darker, and it was just a handprint, like sideways on the wall, a left hand. And Maya was already scared because we'd gone on a ghost walk, ghost tour.
Right. Yeah.
And so she was already wanted to take a shower with the door open, and then I called her and I was like, "Oh my God," and showed her the hand, and I took pictures, but you can't see it as clearly. Anyway,
Yeah.
So that's what our podcast is about today. And if you guys have not already, and you would do this for me, as you come in, can you please give this video a thumbs up? Because that helps my channel to be recommended. Jeremy's here as producer, and Jeremy has started a business which is for graphic designs, hosting podcasts, producing. If you guys need anything like that, please get in contact with me and I'll get you in contact with producer Jeremy, who does a great job. If you guys are only listening to this and not watching it, take a look at it sometime because we send Jeremy the pictures we want him to use, and he does a great job of putting them up for us when we need them. So as some people have noticed, Victor has noticed, when we are discussing a topic, those pictures will come up. Well, that's all Jeremy. That's what he's doing for us. And Josh is moderating for half a second, but moderator Maya will be here in a minute. She just got off of her job where she gets paid with something other than "I love you, Maya." Okay, Jory, how have you been?
I've been good. So I know you and I talked about this a little bit, but you hosted a podcast for Jeremy and Rob where you guys discussed near-death experiences.
Yes.
And I can't remember what I was doing that day, but I wasn't able to participate very much in chat.
Right.
But I wanted to just throw my hat in the ring and talk about this show that my wife and I love to watch. It's called Expedition Unknown. It's hosted by Josh Gates. And ironically, he did a 4-part series for his show that talked about if they could find proof of existence after life. And so the first episode dealt with near-death experiences. And he went and saw a doctor in New York. And I apologize if you can hear a dog barking in my background. I've got a house full of them right now. So he went to a doctor in New York, and he was able to talk to this gentleman and figure out what kind of, like, is there scientific proof? Is there a way for them to prove that there's life after death? And this scientist goes from hospital to hospital, and he sets up these experiments, because when people claim they have a near-death experience, they claim that they rise from their bodies and they continue to rise, and they can see over the room, or they can see everything around them. So he sets up these hidden objects throughout the entire hospital, and in hospitals where he knows, like, there's a victim that's close to dying. I guess the odds of being able to study this are really astronomical, because you don't know if you can bring somebody back or not.
Hold on a second, Jory.
But he hides these objects.
Jory, are you on the internet?
No.
You're using your data?
Yeah.
Okay.
Why?
They're just cutting out, so I didn't know. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, let me see if I can fix that for you folks. Give me 1 second.
Okay. Dead air. Hey, guys. It's me. Hi, Mad Meerkat. Hi, Victor. Victor is on a streak. Good job, Vic.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So when these people would come back to their bodies and they would awake, he would question them, and they would be able to give him details of the hospital, and they would actually point out the objects that he had hidden that nobody else knew about.
Whoa.
And then another professor, he was a professor for Harvard or something like that. He had a near-death experience. He was dying from an illness, and when he had his experience, there was a woman on the other side there greeting him. He said she was the most beautiful woman she had ever seen, or he had ever seen, and she just kept telling him how much he was loved, and that it wasn't his time yet. He still had more things to do, but he was loved, and there would be love waiting for him, and blah, blah, blah. So he comes back from his near-death experience, and eventually he figures out he was actually adopted as a child, and he ends up meeting his birth family. And they show him a picture of a sister of his that had died a few months prior, at around the same time he almost died. Mm-hmm. And the woman in the picture was the woman he saw on the other side. It was his sister.
Wow.
And then CAT scans had shown that while he was in his coma, that the activity in his brain that would be possible to create hallucinations was dead. There was no function. So there was no possible way for him to hallucinate this interaction with this woman, because his brain activity in that area was dead.
Wow.
So science is slowly catching up to figuring out that there might actually be something after this life, apparently. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's interesting. Thank you for sharing that with us. Any thoughts, Jeremy?
Yeah, if I can, I'll look on YouTube, see if I can't find that specific episode for you, and I'll send it your way.
Okay, guys. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and get into Civil War Hauntings. Jory, do you want to go first, or what? What is the plan today, Jory?
I can go first if you want me to.
Okay.
Okay.
Scare me.
I will. By the way, it's been a while since I've talked to the people. Hello, Exiters or Lighters. Good seeing you guys again.
Oh, what about me?
I talk to you all the time.
All right. This is true.
So we're going to start with a figure who is probably the most synonymous with the Civil War. We're going to talk about good old Mr. President Abraham Lincoln.
Okay.
Encounters with President Lincoln's ghost in the capital of the nation he helped preserve have occurred for decades, especially in the White House. The first person to chance upon Lincoln's spirit was First Lady Grace Coolidge, wife of the 30th President of the United States, Calvin Coolidge. First Lady Coolidge claimed to see President Lincoln staring out over the Potomac River from the Oval Office. The Lincoln bedroom, formerly Lincoln's office, is said to be another hotspot where the great emancipator continues to visit from beyond the grave. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt and the Queen Wilhelmina. Did I drink? No? Okay. Just had to make sure. Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands have both experienced paranormal activity within. To this day, many still say that his footsteps can be heard pacing the hall outside. I like the Lincoln ghost story because a lot of state officials, a lot of foreign officials, heads of power see his ghost when they visit and stay in the White House. These are people who would not publicly humiliate themselves, I would hope. So for them to be like, yeah, I was just sleeping in the bed in the Lincoln room and there was the President of the United States. That's really cool to me. Like, that's really fascinating. I love it.
Yeah, people who aren't sketchy or, respected heads of state that aren't going to say, oh, by the way, I saw a ghost, and have their constituents think they're not jobs without, good reason.
Right, exactly. And previous presidents have seen him there. Even Abraham Lincoln predicted his own death, I think, in the exact same room where he supposedly haunts now.
Really?
Yeah, he apparently had a premonition of his own death. He wasn't sure how it happened, but he saw himself, like a ghostly figure of himself in the room. He saw his doppelganger. So he knew that he was due to die soon, which not long afterward was the trip to Ford Theater where John Wilkes Booth assassinated him. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. Pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm. So, isn't the Lincoln bedroom one of the most requested bedrooms to stay in?
Yes. Yes,
I wonder if that's so they can try and see his ghost.
I just know that, so I have this bucket list of things that I want to do when I'm super rich and famous.
We're getting there.
And on that bucket list is to stay in Lincoln's bedroom in the White House. Really? Oh, yeah. Well, I've always wanted to go to the White House to begin with. Notwithstanding who currently lives there. The White House itself has a very rich history, and a lot of comings and goings have happened throughout that house for a very long time. So it would just be interesting to go there and just soak in the history of all the important decisions that have been made in that house, and just be a part of like real American history, and be able to sleep overnight in the Lincoln bedroom would just be awesome.
I think even if I was president, I might spend the night in the Lincoln bedroom. Several.
I would definitely have the Secret Service guards in the room while I slept if I was president.
Yeah.
And then I would just tell them like, oh, it's for my safety from would-be assassins. But secretly, it just wouldn't want Abe Lincoln waking me up in the middle of the night.
Right. Well, I'm not sure the Secret Service can do anything about that.
But at least someone would be there to be like, oh, that's Abe Lincoln. And I'd be like, I know, right? Let's get out of here.
I would sit him down and ask him some questions.
Yeah. Right.
Be like, was that play worth it?
Yeah.
Was that the best damn play you ever saw?
Tell me, how good did it feel to know he broke his leg immediately after shooting you in the head?
Yeah, probably pretty good.
Karma's a
Okay.
bitch, eh?
Yeah, yes. All right, I am going to talk about the National Soldiers Orphan Homestead. The National Soldiers Orphan Homestead.
Say that 3 times fast.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so this one is good, and it's very good. So, during the Battle of Gettysburg, this building was the headquarters of the Union General Howard. In 1866, it was turned into an orphanage, and at one point it had 130 boys and girls. Now, here's the thing. Not all of those boys and girls were actually orphans. Some of those boys and girls were just taken to there, either by surviving mothers who couldn't take it, or possibly stolen by the woman who ran the orphanage. As a result of the Civil War, there was a need to house, clothe, educate, and care for thousands of orphaned children. In the spring of 1866, a movement was initiated to establish this orphanage, and the site selected belonged to J. George Wolfe. It was on 2 acres. It contained a large 2-story brick house, had good water and a garden, and a fine orchard. The orphanage was officially opened on November 20th with 22 children, 12 boys and 10 girls. By 1868, there were 60 orphans residing there. 1869, the existing facility was too crowded. So a new 3-story frame structure was erected, and that was added on as a wing. Part of the old barn on the premises was moved to the house and altered also into its present shape. Unfortunately, by 1870, monetary support for the homestead waned. So during this time, a new teacher and disciplinarian and her name was Rosa J. Carmichael. She accepted the position at the homestead. She was described as having few equals and a most assiduous and faithful worker. Now, this woman was an evil, nasty bitch. She designed something called the pit, where she would throw the children in to be beaten. She would use she had a 19-year-old helper and a 17-year-old helper, and when she would throw the children in the pit, these 2 boys would beat them with sticks while she watched.
Hey, Mom.
Yes? Yeah?
Is there a car horn going off in your background?
Yeah, I think it's a car alarm.
Oh, okay. I thought I was hearing things for a second because it was just faint enough for me to notice it, but at the same time, I'm like, am I hearing this right?
Yeah, that was really good hearing because it was super faint even here.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm a superhero.
You're a superhero.
Anyways.
So, all those times you told me you couldn't hear me.
Oh, son of a gun.
Yeah.
I've been ousted.
Mm-hmm. Having a drink of my coffee. Okay, so she would chain the orphans to the walls. You can tour this building to this day, and it is said that it feels so evil that psychics won't go into the building because of how bad it feels. Over the next several years, it was disastrous for the children and the institution as more and more abuses started. A little boy escaped and told somebody that he had been beaten there. I believe he was like 4 years old. So on June 11th, 1876, Mrs. Carmichael was arrested on a warrant charging cruelty to orphans and held on $300. She was indicted on 3 counts of aggravated assault and battery. She was found guilty on one of those counts, and she was fined $20 plus court costs. And you think $20, but we're talking about the Civil War. And the crash of the economy that caused. So $20 was quite a bit of money. The scandal spread over the next several months, and the Waynesboro Village Record, which was the newspaper, reported the story of a 16-year-old boy who was missing part of his arm, and how he once made his way to town claiming that he had come from the homestead. He said that he had a sister, two sisters, Lizzie and Bella, and they were both 17 years old, and described how they were beaten and used to do all the scrubbing and cleaning in the orphanage, and to clean up after the kids when they had been beaten, and then they were locked into their room. The cruel practices of Mrs. Carmichael upon the helpless children became so outrageous that Corporal Skelly, Post No. 9, Grand Army of the Republic, when he had her arrested, they usually took into account the sex of the person. And in this case, they did that. So because she was a woman doing this, that's why they only fined her $20 instead of, much more. But like I said, even then, that was still quite a bit of money. When they went there to arrest her, she had a child who was 4 years old, penned in an outhouse. They released him at midnight, and apparently she used to do this to him, lock him in the outhouse. And at one time, some people walking by heard him in there screaming and went and got him. She would have children stand on a stool for hours and hours and hours, 12 plus hours, and if they moved, they would get beaten. There was a 5-foot by 8-foot dungeon in the cellar with shackles she would throw the children down into. So the homestead property was eventually sold at a sheriff's sale during the summer of 1878. But as I said, you can still tour it to this day. And if you dare, do that. I would go, although if psychics won't go because of the things they see, I don't know. I think the Ghost Adventures might have investigated this place once.
I was going to say, this sounds very familiar. I think they might have been there.
I wonder what they saw.
I'm trying to, because it's starting to piece together in my head. I can remember the interviews. But yeah, that's a very dark place. To have all that stuff happen to children is disgusting.
Yeah, and so you had children who were orphans because of the war, so they lived through the war, and then they were 4 or 5 years old, and then they had to live through that. And some of them actually weren't orphans; they were just dropped off there or taken. I don't know why you would add more children intentionally by taking children, but when I go to historical sites, I kind of feel like I said, and I'll get to later, in Vicksburg, I just felt the enormity of this situation. It was so heavy on my chest that I think going into a place where children were tortured, I don't know, I think that would, for me, I don't know if I actually could, because the feeling I think would be, I started bawling on a Civil War ship. And on a Civil War site next to the, unclaimed soldiers, because the feeling was just so heavy. So I don't know. That's not good.
Yeah.
Do you have another one? Is there any questions in the chat? And
I know
can you?
Diabolical Witnesses is wanting to stay in the Lincoln bedroom.
Is he?
Yeah.
Ah. Well, you should go to this orphanage. Ugh, I wonder. Could you do that? Would you go into the orphanage and talk into a ghost box and experience that, Brian, or would that be too much?
I'm sure he would do it. He went to the domes for crying out loud.
Yeah, but that's not children being.
Yeah, but there were satanic rituals. People conjuring
Yeah.
dark spirits. I mean, if he could stomach that, he can stomach. I'm sure he could stomach going into that house.
But he has children. I think it's. I don't know. Is he answering or anything?
I don't know. I was just in there a little bit ago. I'll see what he said.
Okay. Because I can't see it right now.
Victor Lyon says he would do it.
Would you, Victor? Mm.
I would do it.
Civil War amputations were chronic. It's almost a fad. The unskilled doctor stuff. Well, yeah. Well, like I said, they had amputations down to what I say, 15 seconds.
Yeah.
They just that. You know why though? Can I explain why that was happening? If you got shot with a musket ball in your leg, you were losing it. You had to lose that. It did that much damage to your limb. And if you got shot in a limb, you were lucky. Because if you got shot in your core, these were made out of lead, and you would, if they took it out, there was so much lead in them that you would still die from lead poisoning. So they didn't take them out. So if you were shot in the core, or they would, but you would still die. If you were shot in your core, you were out of luck. You were going to die. And so they would do these on the battlefield amputations and then carry them off. Or what they did was they would take over mansions and turn them into hospitals. And you'll see, I have pictures coming up that I personally took of a home that was taken and used as a Civil War hospital. And they have the saws that they used and bones where you can see how they just like right through, no hesitation. And but like they said if you were if you had it in anywhere that wasn't like even in your shoulder up more towards your it wasn't your arm, it was in towards your body, out of luck, bud. You're gonna die. And they didn't have time to worry about it. They could lose 1,000 or more people a day in these skirmishes. So, ugh. And then they were giving them, I think it was heroin or some sort of opiate for pain. I feel like it was heroin, but I can't say that for sure. And so, ketamine? Okay, so then they would become addicted to this. So listen, I'm going to give you guys here you go. Here's some history for you. So they would become addicted to the painkillers they were given, right? The soldiers who survived and went home. They would become addicted to these pain stuff. It wasn't the war, it was the medical practices that lead to spiritual imprints. You think so? I wonder, because they were also brother fighting brother. They could be in a war against people they knew. The whole thing. So they became addicted to the pain medication they were given, and they were kept on. So what happened was this man came up with this concoction to help them get off of them being addicted. And this concoction was Coca-Cola with cocaine in it. So this was sold as a medication to help wean off of the drugs they were given for amputations. And then people became addicted to cocaine instead. So, and this was given to children, everybody. And methamphetamines had been invented then too. And they would try to wean off that. So now you got a whole bunch of people addicted to cocaine. And so they made a law that they had to get the cocaine out of the Coca-Cola. But do you know that to this day, Coca-Cola uses the cocoa leaf that's used for cocaine, but they have to take out all of the drug, but it's still in there. Ta-da! You're welcome. Isn't that weird?
Welcome to History 101 with Exit Light.
I know. I love this part of history too, and I love little like tidbits that will only help me in Trivial Pursuit, and apparently, Trivial Pursuit.
So, this is a bit of a time jump, but in World War II, Hitler was continuing to try to make super soldiers and using his own army to experiment on. And they came up with different kinds of drugs and concoctions to feed these soldiers, to make them super soldiers and make them fight harder and last longer and more impervious to pain. And they came up with a concoction that was basically what we know of today as meth, and gave it to these soldiers. And at first they were fighting machines out on the battlefield, marching into Russia, just tearing up Russia completely, until they became addicted to meth. And then they started falling apart because they were addicted to meth.
Then they started picking at their skin, trying to get the bugs out, and their teeth fell out.
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
wow.
It's funny, and it sucks that these wars happened, but the medical science that came out of them did more for us in the last 100 years than medical science has done in the past 1,000 years. Just from the time period of the Civil War through World War II.
All right.
So I don't want to say there's a bright side to the coin, because war is never good. I'm just trying to say that. I'm just trying to say it. Don't condone it.
Right.
But the medical community was able to grow from it. And so that's nice.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the scientific studies that were done in the concentration camps led to discoveries, which is horrific, and yet still used today or expanded on because of that. It's like, ugh.
Yep.
So crazy.
Yeah.
But what tree is it that is aspirin? Is it the aspen? The bark of an aspen tree that you chew on, and it has aspirin in it? I mean, Native Americans discovered all kinds of stuff that we use today. Arnica and lavender and all these kinds of things that they used to use. I think it's the aspen tree that the bark is where they get aspirin. Which is,
I know it's something
weird.
like that. I know, going back to the cocoa leaf, the ancient civilizations that lived down there in South America, especially up in the mountains where the cocoa leaves grow, they would actually chew on the cocoa leaves throughout the day, because it gave them energy to do their chores, because they lived so high in the mountains that their oxygen intake was thin.
Right.
So they needed the cocoa leaf energy to get through their daily chores, and I don't think they knew that technically they were doing cocaine all day.
Yeah, well, cocaine has a lot of stuff added, and it's one leaf, if you boil it down, doesn't equal that much cocaine in it. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So they would use it to chew on for pain too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Or if they had toothaches, you chew on a cocoa leaf, and it would take away the pain in your toothache. And
Yeah.
if we use that stuff for what it like its intention, I think we were given these herbs and plants and stuff to use, but we being human then have to take it too far, and before you know it, we have cocaine instead of just cocaine and Coca-Cola. Here's your medicine.
So this is going to go far off the map, and I apologize to the viewers, but we're still doing History 101, I guess.
Okay.
Hold on, the wife is summoning me for a second.
Anyway, what should we talk about while there's dead air? I have my Christmas tree up. Does anybody else have a Christmas tree up? Probably not. I do. And I like it. It was leaves from the willow tree. Oh, really? The willow tree? Oh, I used to have a willow tree in my front yard. Dang it. Dang it, Steve. I didn't know that.
All right, I apologize for that.
Okay.
Anyways, so this kind of harkens back to the near-death experience topic that we were talking about, but we're also talking about medicine, so this combines both. So in South America, again, there is this root, this plant that you can take, and this kind of falls under the DMT area that people talk about. You take this root, and it's supposed to allow you, while you're still alive, to cross to the other side.
Jeremy, so, you're going to know about this.
Josh Gates took this, and he was under supervision of the village elders in the area. And for 8 hours straight, he had a constant hallucination of what he interpreted as the other side. And he said he saw all in once great beauty and great devastation. Like he was filled with joy and intense sadness and fear all at the same time. And he was able to see like relatives that passed away. He was able to see people from the past. And it actually made him like, the show showed him like constantly puking in the buckets.
What's it called, Jeremy? What's the plant that Jory's talking about that you would go on a trip to go see the other side, and it makes you puke?
Yeah, that's it. Ayahuasca. They call it the plant of the soul, or something like that. Vine of the soul. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Jeremy has a story about that guy about this guy who went on a journey, who had been suicidal, and he went there and went to a shaman and did ayahuasca, and it's like amazing.
Yeah, he did an interview after the experience, and he was like breakdown crying because it was such a personal journey for him to go on, and he had a hard time talking about it. And it was like, I don't know if I want to be puking in the buckets, but it kind of made me curious to try it.
Well, Jeremy, can you get on? Can you get where we can hear you, Jeremy? Okay, he's gonna get set up in a second. So, yeah, Jeremy talked a little bit about this last week, and about how people describe other people describe as near-death experiences, and how people on that drug have the same type of experience as people who have had near-death experiences. And therefore, could it be some chemical released? Are you on, Jeremy?
Yeah.
Okay. You want to tell Jory?
So we didn't really get into it with the podcast that I did with Rob, but yeah, the similarities between like a full-length ayahuasca trip and a near-death experience, they correlate a lot. I would say like more than 75% of the trip or the experience, whatever you want to call it, they mirror each other in ways where you would think an experience would be obvious it's a drug, or obvious that there's a sort of chemical thing happening with your body, but what happens with ayahuasca and a lot of other experiences like that is something you call true hallucinations, where every form of perception that you have in your body is completely convinced of this new reality. And you hear it a lot of times with people in their near-death experiences and in ayahuasca trips, because they mirror each other so frequently.
Interesting.
So there you go. We ended up going back to the near-death thing again. All right. Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate that. As soon as Joy started talking about it, I was like, wait. I know what this is. As soon as Joy started talking about it, I mean. Thank you, Jeremy. Okay, Jory, you got something you want to scare me with?
Okay, back on topic. Apologies, everybody.
That's all right. We're having a conversation.
So this next place I'm going to talk about, you, me, and my wife actually were here. The Beauregard Keys house.
Mm-hmm.
The Beauregard Keys house in the French Quarter of New Orleans was once home to Confederate officer Pierre Gustave Toutant Beauregard. He was a leading general at the Battle of Fort Sumter in 1861. Following the Union's victory, Beauregard accepted defeat and returned to New Orleans to spend the rest of his days at 1113 Charter Street. Today, the fallen commander still haunts his former abode. Visitors to the building not only encounter Beauregard, but also see soldiers who are presumed to have died by his side in the Battle of Shiloh, another bloody battle where Beauregard fought. So while myself, my mom, and my wife were in New Orleans, we walked past this house several times.
Yes.
And I believe it was even a part of the ghost tour.
Yeah. Yep.
And every time we walked past it, it felt like somebody was watching me from the inside of the house. And it was one of the very few houses that actually made me feel that way, which you would think you would feel a ton of supernatural energy in the French Quarter of all places. Right. But the Beauregard house was one of the few places that really made me like stare at it. It gave off it. I can always just feel certain vibes with certain places. And this place gave off a certain vibe that was like, I want to go in here and I want to ghost hunt. I want to stay the night. And it was funny because it wasn't even really the ghost tour, the one thing I liked about the ghost tour we went on is the gentleman who hosted it didn't talk about the tour as if it was this, and the spirit of a bloody woman with her head severed haunts this, and if you're here at 3:00 in the morning on November 5th. No, like he came at it at a historical standpoint and then just said what the claims were, and that was it.
Yeah.
So the house was never presented to actually be haunted, but the vibe I got from it was like, okay, this feels unique. I want to try this place out, and it's a very beautiful house. I wish I could own it.
Yes. Yes, it is. Diabolical Witness says, Jory proved to me that he can sense paranormal. Yeah. That house and the Lalaurie house, to me,
Yeah.
are buildings that come with a very dark feeling.
I loved being in the French Quarter of New Orleans because it's the only place I've ever been in my entire life where I was completely surrounded by history of that kind. Because New Orleans has been around since the 1700s, and that's just as a city. We're not even talking before that.
Yeah.
So you just felt the history.
Yeah.
And like you said, the Lalaurie house, like you could just feel everything that went on in that house.
Yeah.
The Beauregard house, you could just sense. You can just sense its own presence. Like it's hard. It's hard to explain how unique that place is.
Yeah.
Or that feeling at the Beauregard house was. It was just so. Even if you don't believe in ghosts or you're a skeptic of the paranormal in general, you have to appreciate just taking a walk through the French Quarter and just appreciate hundreds and hundreds of years of people living in that one area and what contributions they made to society.
Yeah. Well, and all it's been through, it burned down twice and was rebuilt. Obviously went through Hurricane Katrina. The people there are strong-willed, and the history shows that. And I've heard that in the Beauregard house, that you can even see soldiers in there.
Mm-hmm. And you got to remember too, it's like, and especially in the French Quarter, but the town itself survived the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, and the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
So 3 of some of our biggest wars on American soil,
right,
this town has been a part of.
Right. It's I love that feeling too. I can feel history. I love it.
Yeah.
I always wanted. Well, here's a story about me. When I was little, I wanted to be a what are the people? I can't think of the word. I just told you this story that my brain is fried. Archaeologist. I wanted to be an archaeologist. There's 2 things I wanted to be. I really badly wanted to be an archaeologist because even being little, I was fascinated with history, and I wanted to be a nun. So, I was disappointed because my mom told me I couldn't be a nun because we weren't Catholic.
Yeah.
Which, ripping my dreams away, why don't you?
You know, it's funny that Grandma would be like, "Oh, you can't be a nun because you're not Catholic." We raise our children to tell them they can be whatever they want. So you could have actually just, and I know, like in your child brain, when your mom tells you can't do it, then you just can't do it.
Right.
And it's over. It's finito. But you could have just switched religions and became a nun.
I could have been a nun.
You could have been a nun.
I could have been a nun archaeologist.
You could have been, a nun archaeologist on the quest for the Ark of the Covenant.
I always tease Rob that that nuns get to wear a head cape. So I always saw them as like superhero because they get to wear a head cape. Ryan says, "Thanks for not being a nun."
Superheroes for Jesus.
Superheroes for Jesus. Yeah, I was like, "Oh, I love that style."
Oh, there's another T-shirt. Jeremy, write it down. Superheroes for Jesus.
Yeah, my mom was just crusher of dreams, killer of life. Whatever. I didn't become an archaeologist either, so thanks for that. Okay, so I'm going to talk about my next one. which is the Devil's Den. First off, if anything is named the Devil, stay away from it. That just should be the rule. Okay, so I'm going to give this is some serious history for a second. I want to tell you how this was formed, and then I'm going to sum it up for those of you who go, I don't get it, because it took me several times. So the Devil's Den was formed with, so around the Devil's Den, this is part called Little Round Top, and it's to the east-northeast of it. And then there's this place called Big Round Top, which is to the southwest. And it was formed by those and a periglacial frost wedging of the igneous landform. And this formed 200 million years ago when a diabase sill intruded through the Triassic Gettysburg Plain. Anybody understand that? Well, look at the pictures being put up. And what that means is the glaciers pushed a bunch of rocks together. Thanks for that. They could have just said that. They could have just said glaciers pushed rocks together. We would have understood that, right? That's all you got to say. The feature acquired its foreboding name prior to the 1863 war. Throughout the mid-19th century, local residents believed that the crevices between the boulders were a home to a large snake that was as large as 15 feet. The snake became known as the Devil, hence the Devil's Den. So I can see not going in there. Gettysburg is perhaps the most haunted of all Civil War battlefields. But there's one particular spot where the energy is especially dark. Devil's Den is an area of boulders on the Gettysburg battlefield. The craggy formation is located at the site of the second day of the Battle of Gettysburg. It was the Civil War's most brutal battle, with the highest number of casualties, many of whom still linger around the rocky outcropping. It was ideal, actually, if they had been used correctly, because it basically covered you from every direction. If you were in there, there's a picture I gave to Jeremy where they set up rocks so they could be behind something and fire and shoot people walking towards it. It was a tiny little fort in the middle of a field that just so happened to have rocks pushed together because of glaciers. And but it was, like they said, a horrible, bloody battle. At Gettysburg, it was set up to be a failure, really. The Union Army thought they were at a disadvantage, but the Confederate Army was getting tired. Lincoln had laid the railroads so that the Union forces could get food and clothing and blankets, and he didn't lay the railroads down, obviously, for the Confederate side. So the Union was able to have reinforcements, have food, have clothing. The Confederates weren't, and they weren't prepared to come against people who were not as tired, injured, mentally off as the Confederates were. And at one battlefield, they had set it up so that the Union soldiers had to climb a fence to go towards them, which was what you would think would be perfect, right? It was like shooting fish in a barrel. But the Union Army still took that battle. And it was because they could outgun them and were able to load their muskets faster than them and still get through and kill the people in the front lines that were shooting at them. It was just the railroad is actually what helped the Union side to win. And basically just comes down to that. So this particular site, one particular holdover is a barefooted man who can be seen walking around the Devil's Den. Now, this is interesting. He's wearing a bright shirt and a floppy hat, which was the uniform of the disorganized Army unit from Texas. We sent a unit, disorganized and wearing sunbonnets. He utters one phrase to people who see him. What you're looking for is over there. What he's referring to may never be known. I want to go see this place so bad. You know what I hate about it is that there's like a parking lot. Jeremy, do you have that aerial view of it? There's like a parking lot. It looks like a children's playground. So weird that we do this to our historical sites. The rocks are really worn down from people walking into it, touching it, and you're just rubbing off history. I get touching it. I like to do that too. Like I said, in the Alamo, I was the only person putting my fingers in the musket holes. Everybody else was off looking at guns and uniforms, and I'm thinking the real history, because the uniforms they were displaying weren't even uniforms that were actually used at the Alamo. They were just the soldiers in general uniforms, and the guns weren't the guns used at the Alamo. The real history was the fact that there were still musket holes in the walls that had been used to try and kill the people in there. To me, that's the history. You know, not what they were wearing. The fact that that musket could have gone right through a body, or at the very least was intended to. And that is so profound to me. It's the only word I can say.
Yeah.
I just that's my love of history.
Yeah, it would be well, Gettysburg as a whole is like number one on my bucket list of places to go.
Yeah. I don't want to take like a guided tour, although the information would be valuable. But I don't want to, I just feel like it deserves more reverence. Like, you know, I don't want to be on the tour with kids and their candy and people laughing, and I really just want to go and be silent and feel it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember when we were in New Orleans that we went and you can still to this day see where the Confederate soldiers are buried in Lafayette Cemetery 1.
Yep.
Confederate soldiers. That is, I mean, just to stand there and just, wow. It's just, like I said, it's profound. I mean, either side, the violence and what they went through, and just horrific.
It makes it real for you.
Yeah.
Because,
yes.
you know, you're taught Civil War in school, and, you know, you can research it on your own. But, you know, this was something that happened like 140 something years ago, or whatever however long it was. So it's not real to you because you weren't even a twinkle in your great grandmother's eye or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's like for you to be able to go visit the gravesite of a Civil War soldier. Like, there's actually a grave of a general that served in the Civil War right by where my wife and I got married, about, I don't know, probably 30 minutes from here. And after the war, he ended up moving to the Arizona Territory and serving in the local government. But you go and you see his grave and you're just like, this guy fought in the Civil War. Like, that is insane. And he's just buried right here, like 30 minutes from me.
Yeah. Diabolical Witness says, my great-grandfather was a big archaeologist in the 1900s. Jealous. And he also said, what did she say? Are you talking about me? What did I say? What did I say, Brian? What did I say? In regards to what? What was I saying? Yeah, that's what kills me is like just the ability to go be in history, like to stand in Gettysburg, where thousands of people literally bled out right there, that the earth is soaked in blood is, I mean, I think you just have to take a minute and stop taking pictures and just feel that it's uh, amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I feel like I'm like I'm an empath in that way. That I feel like I can feel the heaviness, the weight, the pain, the fear. Which I don't think is a bad thing. I wish that like everybody could do that so we don't repeat, what's happened. We are all like Indiana Jones because of our interest. Yeah. Yeah. All right, Jory. What's your next Civil War thing?
All right, we're going to talk about Kolb's Farm.
Okay.
Even the war's lesser-known battles left ghosts behind. One such skirmish took place at Kolb's Farm in 1864, near Marietta, Georgia. Approximately 1,000 Confederate soldiers lost their lives that day in a failed attempt to overtake nearby Union forces. The present-day subdivision of Kolb Ridge Court, which sits near the former battlefield, is believed to be haunted by many of these fallen soldiers. One family, the Tatums, are convinced a soldier spirit actually moved anyways, are convinced the soldier spirit actually moved into their home after taking a liking to their guest room. The entity is a trickster, but good-natured. He often tugs on the hands and clothing of visitors and plays with objects. For their part, the Tatums have learned to live with their supernatural roommate, accepting him as own of their own. I guess that's an interesting way to word that. But that's interesting that there's certain hauntings that stick out to me where people can actually talk about a spirit moving from place to place, not really being attached to one place or the other. But it's always seemed to be preached like a spirit haunts, the place where they were murdered in life, or there was a great tragedy. And I like to hear about the hauntings of this soldier just being like, "Oh, I like their guest room. I guess I'm staying here." I find that interesting. That's pretty cool.
The Tatum haunting is very, very famous.
Yeah.
And I think they might have even been interviewed by Ghost Adventures. They're an older couple now.
Mm-hmm.
And, they see other spirits in the house as well and say that they can feel them. But like this one, they it doesn't feel threatening to them. So
Right.
they just make comments about it and it lives there.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Well, okay, so the Kolb farm, part of that farm was turned into a subdivision, which is where the Tatum family lives.
Mm-hmm.
They built a subdivision, and okay, so they had one of the largest death skirmishes. The largest skirmishes with, okay, what am I trying to say? The largest amount of deaths during a skirmish was on the Kolb farm property and around it. And they didn't have time or any place to bury soldiers away from the skirmish, so they buried them there where they fell is where they were buried. So in a very what's that movie where the girl gets pulled into the tea? Poltergeist. In a very poltergeist manner, they went in and if I don't know if you guys know how subdivisions are built, but I happen to. So they have to go in and grate the land, which basically means take off the top layer and then make it even. And in doing so, they were just pulling up soldiers' bones right and left. And I'm surprised that they were. That's something that bugs me about our history. You go to other countries and it's not touched. It's revered. There's not a Ripley's Believe It or Not across the street like at the Alamo.
Right.
In ours, we're gonna set up tourist attractions and we're gonna make money off of this. And I hate that. And then in this regard, we're just gonna like disturb all of these men who were killed in the most brutal fashion, so we can put a subdivision. Hey, let's build houses. What? You really basically just dug up a graveyard. I wouldn't get in your pool if I were you. It's just so, I don't know. It just feels so wrong to me. The fact that so many people make money off of like in Gettysburg, for instance. If you look it up, there's so many tours and ghost walks and all that kind of stuff that they make. It's a huge tourist attraction. I understand it being a tourist attraction. Don't get me wrong. I understand that people want to go visit history, but when you make it like have people dress up as soldiers so you can stand next to them, take your picture, and smile. Hey, that's so weird. Do you understand what happened here?
Mm-hmm.
These were boys, literally boys, and someone's son and someone's dad and someone's brother and a lot of them. It was horrific. And we're gonna just go, hey, this is fun. It's so weird to me. That's another reason why I like New Orleans, because it's against the law to change anything. Like the New Orleans you see right now is the New Orleans it was. Same colors. Same paint. You're not allowed to change it. You cannot get 2 cars down the street. Sorry, because it was only built for wagons.
Yeah.
I like that part. I like that. Let's just maintain history. Even the Café du Monde has been there for what, over 100 years?
Something like that.
Open 24 hours a day. Took 1 day off during Katrina, and that was it. Love that. Anyway, I'm whining again about people and history. I just feel like it should be treated in the same manner as a church is treated, with that kind of reverence and respect.
Right.
I don't know. It could just be me. I mean, lots of people do go and take their pictures next to pretend soldiers and smile. It is a thing. Not in my house. I mean, I would, obviously, I'd love to go. I mean, I just can't even, I would love to go. But like I said, I would like to get a map and sort of be able to do the tour by myself so I could just stand out in a field and just experience that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Are you with me? You going to go with me?
I would do it in a heartbeat.
Okay. We should do that. That'd be fun. Not fun. Fun isn't the word, but you know what I mean. Like, maybe fun. Just exciting. Okay, so we're going to talk about Fort Monroe, if you'd like. Let's talk about Fort Monroe.
Let's talk about Fort Monroe.
Let's do it. Apparitions from the Civil War era are seen or heard most often through the installation, and this installation has been around in one form or another since 1608, before the Civil War. Construction of the official fort was finished in 1834. It was built as a peacetime garrison for 600 soldiers. Its original mission was to provide coastal defense. It's on an island. It supported around 5,000 soldiers during the Civil War and remained part of the Union despite being surrounded by the Confederate territory. Jefferson Davis, who was the Union president, Confederate president, was imprisoned there because he was also accused of plotting the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. Davis was taken for evening walks along the ramparts during the day, and his wife lived nearby in a house, so she could go outside or look through her window every day when he was taken for a walk, and she could see him, and he could see her, and that way she could know that he was doing okay. Davis's ghost is seen walking the ramparts at night to this day, and the window in the house where his wife stayed will vibrate when people see her in that room. Quarters number 1 is reportedly visited by the ghost of Abraham Lincoln. A crew of paranormal investigators also caught electric voice phenomena inside the house, a recording of a little girl calling for her cat, Greta. Currently used as office space, workers have seen the specter of this gray cat disappearing around corners. The same paranormal crew that investigated Quarters 1 also gathered data from the casemates' embrasures or gunwales, and one of the gated areas. They recorded the sounds of disembodied voices, horse hooves, and took pictures that showed orbs, which can be visual indicators of ghosts, as I think everybody here knows. Jane Polanski is an author, and she used to live there, and she's been collecting ghost stories her whole life. She had her first encounter with a ghost in that area in 1960, and this is her statement. She said, "I lived in the house across the street from the Casemate Museum. One night, she brought her dachshund outside to go downstairs to go for a walk. She didn't turn any of her lights on in her house, and when she sat down to wait for the dog, she heard a knocking at her back door. She said that it then began to have scratching noises on a nearby wall, and then the knocking did continue. She said that was the kind of noise I heard, and I thought, what is he doing? And I got up to go and let him in and walked through the dining room where there was a man standing by the fireplace in the dining room. He was very arrogant looking. He had a uniform shirt from a much earlier period, probably mid-18th century, and he had his arm on my mantle. She said, I was stunned. He looked at me very arrogantly, and I just stood there as he disappeared. And meanwhile, I backed away all through the living room and out the front door." I think it's funny that she describes him as arrogant. Like, he's looking at her like, excuse me, what are you doing here? It's my house,
woman.
Yeah, which is interesting to me because we often talk about, like, who is the ghost really? Are we the ghost? And they see us? You know? But the fact that, like, yeah, maybe that was his house. And he's looking at her like, excuse me, you can get out now. You know, not like he's frightened or anything, just he's mad. Her Dachshund came bounding down the street, and she realized then that it had not been him doing the scratching. And her son would see a strange mist in his bedroom while they lived at the house. The current residents report that same mist in the house. There's also a story of a lady in white course, there has to be a lady in white story. And the story is that she was the captain's wife, and her husband shot her for having an affair. She had been married to this captain who was stodgy and boring. So she went and found herself a new young soldier. And the husband went away one day, and she brought the new young soldier into the house, and her husband came back unexpectedly and shot her, killed her, both of them. And it's said that the wife roams the fort in a white nightdress. She's even been seen walking the boardwalk and lurking in what they call Ghost Alley, searching for her boyfriend. I don't think she's searching for her boyfriend. I think she's probably searching for her husband. She might be mad. I'm just saying.
Well, it is a woman. Maybe she's just looking for a place to shop.
This is true. I'm sure there's several places set up around there now where she can shop.
Could you imagine just a ghost woman coming up to you with the dress and be like, "Oh my God, don't you think I look so cute in this?"
Oh my gosh. That's probably it. Her husband's probably out there too. And she's like, "Just a minute. Have you ever seen this? This is so cute. I have to try it on." And he's just like, "Forget it. I'm leaving." And the boyfriend's like, "Where should I go?" "We don't care." Anyway, I think that's interesting that they still see the mist, because my story coming up next has to do with my own story, my own experience, my own photos, and my own mist. So what do you guys think about that?
About what?
About that story.
It was very good. It gave me the chills, and they're multiplying.
I have nothing historical to say about that, about this particular instance. I would love to go and see that fort, though.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love that stuff. And how, now see, I read an account that it was the only fort that the Union didn't take over. But then I read many other accounts that it was a Union stronghold all along, that it was the Union fort, period. And it was just surrounded by Confederates. So it's like, I don't, But my guess is if Jefferson Davis was imprisoned there, that it probably wasn't the Confederates who were holding on to it.
Probably not.
Something tells me if they wouldn't have put him in jail for trying to kill Lincoln. That's my guess.
I think they would have encouraged it.
Probably. It's weird when you look back on your forefathers and things, and they're like Jefferson Davis, and you don't. I have learned as I got older that some of these people were just not what you think of.
Dicks.
Yeah. Yeah. Seriously.
No.
Like, why do we give a shit about Jefferson Davis right now? So weird.
Yeah.
What happened to him after, like, he was told, no, you can't be president? How did he take that news?
Poorly, I imagine. Wasn't he imprisoned after the war?
I don't know. Was he a self-appointed president? Did people vote for him, or how'd this work?
Oh, during the succession, I think he just kind of said, I think he was kind of the forefront leader of the secession in the first place, and so he just kind of naturally became the president of the Confederacy.
Oh, okay. Well, that was a pretty easy way to become president then, wasn't it?
Well, yeah.
Are you eating?
No, of course not.
I can't eat pickles. You can't eat.
I'm sorry, my wife bought me ice cream. I couldn't do it. put it in my face, and I was like, "Oh God, it's ice cream."
I need to look up and see how he reacted to the news that you're bad. You're not president anymore.
I hope it was with a noose.
Oh shit! Well,
I'm
there's
sorry.
one way.
That was strongly worded.
Yeah.
I hope that he found peace with the decision that was made about him not being president anymore.
I wouldn't go that far.
And by peace, I mean at the end of a rope.
Oh shit!
Oh darn
Oh
it!
my god!
I keep saying what I mean.
I hate it when that happens. That gets me in trouble sometimes.
Are you getting a weird interference on your end?
No, are you?
It sounded like. Are you doing something? Maybe.
I was. Yes.
It sounded like some weird movement going on in your background.
I think it was my microphone moving. Probably. Sorry about that.
Sound like gremlins fighting.
I was cleaning my glasses with my T-shirt. I don't. That's.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
So there.
Okay.
That's typically how a gremlin fight starts.
Oh, well. I called it.
Yeah, you did.
What
are you going to tell us about?
Hope those gremlins find the end of the news too.
You're particularly violent today.
Yeah, but yeah, I apologize, folks.
Okay, what are you going to tell us about next?
So, there's this website that I used to go to a lot when I was a teenager. When I was in my teens, I was obsessed with paranormal websites. In the early days of the net, in the 2000s, when I was illegally downloading music off of Napster.
Yeah, I don't think you're that old. Did you illegally download music off of Napster?
Are you trying to get me to admit something?
No. Yeah. Jeremy goes, trap.
It's a trap. Thanks, Admiral Akbar.
I
may have looked to see what Napster was all about.
Really?
But I did not inhale.
We could have been sued, man. We could have been sued.
I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't do anything. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
I've always told the kids, I'm like, never go to one of those websites where you can stream movies and stuff. For, like current movies.
Yeah.
But I may have, somebody I know may have looked at those before.
Oh, yeah? I wonder who that was.
I don't know. It's a mystery. Let's just say I haven't been to a movie theater in a hot minute.
A hot minute.
A hot minute.
Boy, that minute sure was hot.
Woo-wee!
Someone get me a ice cold minute. Came this hot minute.
Give me an ice cold Coke from the 1800s.
Double the cocaine on that. I got this toothache going on.
Oh my God.
All right. So we're going to talk about Pennsylvania Hall.
Okay.
Anyways, so this website I used to go to as a kid, it's called Prairie Ghosts, and it's ran by a paranormal investigator named Troy Taylor. And he does a lot of ghost hunting. He goes throughout the country, but he mostly sticks to the Midwest. but he has investigated Gettysburg, and in this he talks about Pennsylvania Hall. Located within the boundaries of the town in Gettysburg College, or as it was known in 1863, Pennsylvania College, this small, attractive campus seems a quiet place today, and anyone who visits here would probably be surprised to learn that during the battle, the college was in the midst of the fighting. At the time, the college consisted of only 3 brick buildings, which provided lodging and classrooms for little more than 100 students. When the battle erupted, the campus was thrown into the midst of the fight, providing shelter for the wounded and dying as a field hospital. Not surprisingly, the college is said to still bear the marks of not only the physical effects of the battle, but the spiritual effects as well. One of the most haunted buildings on campus is said to be Pennsylvania Hall, a large building with stately white columns. It once served as a dormitory for the students and now houses the campus administrative offices. The hall was constructed in 1837 and is often referred to as Old Dorm. The large structure was taken over by the Confederates during the battle, not only for use as a field hospital, but as a... I'm sorry, am I boring you, Mom?
Sorry.
Is this going to be over? I want to tell my own personal ghost story. Speed it the fuck, excuse my language, up. God, this is a real good time for a nap. You can keep talking.
I needed some extra air for a second. Felt my lungs like, I need some air.
Not only for use as a field hospital, but as a lookout post as well. A number of officers, including General Lee, used the I got ice cream caught in my throat.
I started choking during last week's podcast.
A number of officers, including General Lee, used the cupola of the Old Dorm to keep an eye on the progress of the battle. It has been said that on certain nights, students and staff members of the college have reported seeing the figures of soldiers pacing back and forth in the cupola of the building. The descriptions of the men vary, but it is
this
believed...
Francis Ford Coppola?
No.
Oh, okay.
I think...
Sorry.
Poorly timed jokes by Exit Light.
Sorry. Sorry.
Coming to a Barnes and Noble near you.
Sorry.
Yellowstone.
You don't like it if I'm talking. You don't like it if I don't.
Is this Francis Ford Coppola?
See what I did there? See what I did there? Huh?
Dear God.
Oh my God.
The descriptions of the men vary, but it is believed that they may be sentries who were placed on duty there to guard the safety of Lee or to deliver messages to the battlefield. One student reported that he and his roommate, who lived in a dorm about 50 yards away from Pennsylvania Hall... Okay, we get it, Julie. You're freaking thirsty already.
Can you hear her?
Yeah, she's... She's drinking that water like she's been in the desert for 30 days.
Julie, by the way, Juliet is my Labrador.
Okay. I swear I'm going to get to this story without too many interruptions, I promise.
Well, I was just fighting her off right before that because he was trying to jump up on my lap. This is an 80-pound dog who thinks she's the size of a chihuahua. She has no idea that there's anything behind her head.
Okay. One student reported that he and his roommate, who lived in a dorm about 50 yards away from Pennsylvania Hall, saw a shadowy figure in the tower over a period of several nights. On another occasion, a figure was seen to be gesturing wildly, apparently to a student below. When the student called out to him, believing that perhaps someone was trapped in the tower, the figure vanished. An investigation by campus security found the building to be empty. It is believed to be the terrible conditions of the field hospital, however, which have left the strongest impressions on the building. According to the records of the time, blood sprayed the walls and floors of the rooms as doctors operated without anesthetic, dealing with bullet wounds by the preferred treatment of the time, amputation. Outside of the operating rooms was an area where those who could not be saved were left to die. There is no way that we can even imagine the horrible wails, groans, and cries that echoed in this area. Perhaps the most famous story connected to the time of the battle was related by author Mark Nesbitt. He told of two college administrators who were working on the 4th floor of the building one night. As they were leaving, they stepped into the elevator and punched the button for the 1st floor. Instead of taking them to their destination, the elevator mysteriously passed it and came to a stop on the basement level. The elevator doors then opened to a terrifying scene. The basement storage room had vanished, and in its place was the blood-spattered operating room of 1863. Wounded men were lying prone on the floor, and administering to them were doctors and orderlies in bloody clothing. The entire scene was completely silent, although it was obvious that it was one of chaos. Stunned and horrified, the administrators repeatedly pushed the elevator button, desperately trying to close the doors and escape the scene which lay before them. Just before the doors closed, though, one of the spectral orderlies was said to have looked up directly at the two administrators as though asking them for help. Whatever happened that evening, the two administrators were shaken and frightened by it, and needless to say, never forgot their strange experience. However, you couldn't fault them for their bravery. In the same circumstances, I am not sure what I would have done, but both of these men continued to work in the building. In small concession to the weird experience, though, whenever they had to work at night, they always departed the building by the way of the stairs. So, I watched an episode of Haunted History that interviewed Mark Nesbitt, and they actually did a recreation of this scene on the episode.
Really?
Yeah. It wasn't men, though. They used women actors. But anyways.
That's weird.
Yeah, how do you get that detail mixed up?
Yeah.
But the scene, the episode is a little old, so I was probably a teenager when I first saw it, but the scene actually scared the crap out of me because, 1 minute you're in the now and you're at work, and then the next minute you're like, oh, that's the 1st floor. Why are we going to the basement? And the basement opens and you're in 1863 watching Civil War soldiers, arms being amputated and doctors running around, and you're seeing what happened to these people in the battles.
Do you think that's possible?
That you can see an image of what happened?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that that's possible for that to happen?
I believe so. There's a lot of different theories out there about residual hauntings, and
Right.
one of the theories is what's called the stone tape theory.
Right.
And that's things like certain stones, certain rocks, or even the wood that encompasses the buildings.
Sorry. Josh, want to answer your phone? I can't. think he was asleep. That's moderator Maya calling him, by the way.
It's only 8:30 over there. You should be getting ready for breakfast.
I don't know. You know, life's happening over here. Juliet is now sitting on my lap.
No, anyways. Stone tape theory is basically the wood that the building is made of, or the bricks or the stones, depending on how powerful the energy is, can actually hold and store that energy and randomly play it, kind of like a movie. So I don't know what would have caused the elevator to make the girls or the men go down to the basement, but they could have just been watching a residual haunting of something that happened in that basement, because you got to think, like, there's human blood everywhere. The panic in the soldiers and the doctors is high.
Yeah.
There's people in that room who either thought they were going to die or knew they were going to die that day.
Or wish they were going to die.
Or wish they were going to die. So the raw human emotion in that room alone was probably more than enough to soak into the floor, into the walls, and probably into the ceilings if there was blood spatter, and create. I'm sure there's enough dead down there to create intelligent haunting, but just the energy alone is probably strong enough to hold on to, or was able to be soaked into the building itself and create these residual haunting scenarios, where you can actually see what happened back in the day.
When we stayed at the Provincial, did you feel like you could feel Did you feel as though you could feel the events that had taken place there? Was there I can feel a heaviness or?
For me, the Hotel Provincial, it's going to be weird to say this because it was a Civil War hospital, but I didn't feel darkness or sadness or any. I didn't feel emotional in terms of anything negative, like depression or scared. Well, I was scared at night because I just didn't want to wake up and have a Civil War soldier staring at me. But you okay over there?
I'm sorry. So rude. Juliet just put her face right on my microphone, so I'm holding it now.
Oh, okay.
She's being a big baby.
I think it's just the overall feeling of New Orleans, because everybody there is just so laid back and let's have a good time, and they're always so happy. Dear God.
I'm so tired.
There's a small button on the side of your phone that you can slide over, bud.
Yeah, turn that phone off, Josh.
But I just got an overall, just just a nice overall vibe of the Hotel Provincial. Like, you can tell that there was a good energy there, and you could feel the history still. It just pours out of the building itself.
Yeah.
But I think New Orleans is unique. The people are unique. They just give off this cool, laid back, let's have a good time, life is short, welcome to our home vibe. And I think it kind of levels out any of the bad that ever happened there too,
Yeah. Yeah, well, to think, that, because I don't feel bad or darkness or anything in that hotel either. And to think that they used to pile the bodies up right outside there.
Yeah.
The legs, the limbs and stuff, they used to pile those up, and then the horses and the carriages would come and pick them up, and they would go burn them.
Yeah.
To think about that, and then you stay in there, but it doesn't feel like that. It's so unusual. You would think
Yeah.
it would be very dark and very foreboding, but it's not really.
No. Nope.
Anyway, I was just wondering if you felt like, because we also stayed, your room in particular was across from the Ursuline nuns, where they buried the babies in the wall.
Yeah, I never. It's so hard to explain the feelings that you get when you're in an area that's kind of saturated in energies. But I never, the entire time I was in New Orleans, even when we were, I would say probably the weirdest, creepiest feeling I got was from La Laurie Mansion. But in the overall experience, Juliet fighting you for the mic again.
Yeah, sorry.
In the overall experience of New Orleans, it just felt nice. It was fun. The energy was fun and exciting, and like I said, you just felt like you were walking in history. You were walking down the same sidewalks that somebody 300 years prior walked down. It was just, it's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I never got that vibe from Hotel Provincial, even with the Civil War hospital history with it, and the limbs and the body parts and the dead bodies. I'm sure that it left a mark on that building, and people have reported seeing the ghost of Civil War soldiers there.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it felt warm and inviting, and I had a good time there.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask you, because I never feel that there too. But then you go to other places and you can feel the darkness and
and it felt
fear.
crowded. It never, like, it didn't feel like the place was full to me, but it just constantly felt crowded. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So.
See, that's funny that you should say that, because I get the opposite feeling. I always feel like no matter how many people are there, I feel a sense of being alone. Which is weird. Not in a sad way, just in a isolated way.
Yeah, even when we were, like, you and I and Kendra would go pregame at the bar and get our hurricanes, there might be like one other person in the bar with us, but it felt like the bar was full of people.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're right about that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we also stayed at the Le Pavillon, and the Le Pavillon feels like when you watch The Shining and you get the feeling of The Shining, that is what happens when you walk in Le Pavillon. It's crazy weird in there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You ready for mine?
Yep.
This is so exciting.
Woo!
Okay, so last week I went on a history tour talking about Vicksburg, Mississippi, and got way off track because it has nothing to do with near-death experience. So this week I'm going to get a little bit further into it. So, the city of Vicksburg is perhaps the most historical site in the state, and the one that is perhaps the most steeped in history, legend, and lore than any other. The siege of the city during the Civil War is perhaps one of the most memorable events of the conflict. During the spring and early summer of 1863, General Ulysses S. Grant had tightened a military noose around the city. More than 200 Union guns pounded the town on a daily basis. The civilians in the city starved to death, and the Union soldiers did this on purpose. There is a railroad track that goes its feet from the McRaven House. And, it was placed there for supplies, but they starved the city so that to force them to surrender. So it was terrible. I'll get into it in a second. So the civilians in the city were starving, and some of them left the city and went and dug 500 caves into the hillsides, hoping to escape the Union artillery. Fewer than a dozen of them were killed, but stories spread through the South about the terrible hardships of the people of Vicksburg. And what they were doing was, when they were living in this cage, they were eating rats and raccoons and any kind of vermin they could get their hands on so that they wouldn't starve. So it was a real bad PR move on the Union side, because they wanted to break this town. This was a town that Lincoln said if they didn't seize this town, they would lose the war. It was that important to grab this town. It's right on the Mississippi River. It's actually across the river from Louisiana. It's a big trading spot with boats coming in. So it was necessary to take this by any means possible, I guess. And that included starving men, women, and children. And it was a wealthy town. And if you lived in a large house, it was no longer yours. The Union came and they took over it. You could live in it still, but it wasn't your house. After the war, you could have the house back. And in these houses, to this day, people still find cannonballs and muskets in their walls. And there was a house that had a cannonball in it. And what they do is they call the fire department. And the fire department comes and they gently take it away. And this house called and said, hey, we were doing some remodeling, found a cannonball. They came, took the cannonball, and they were just out of sight of the house, and it exploded and killed everybody around them. I didn't realize that cannonballs exploded.
Yeah, that was actually what did a lot of the damage, is like the initial impact of the cannon. The lead would shoot out. It's almost kind of like shooting a shotgun. Like all the pellets shoot out. It's the same premise as the
shrapnel.
The shrapnel.
I didn't realize that. I thought it was just like the big ball coming in and doing whatever damage it did. You know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, so food was running low in the city, and the people were, like I said, reduced to eating mules, horses, dogs. They would make bread out of dried corn and peas. And I said that they had been eating rats. Well, it got to the point where the butcher shops were actually catching rats and selling them for food. By late June, nearly half of the Confederate army was sick. Houses were in ruins. Fences had been torn down and turned into firewood. Lice and filth covered the bodies of the soldiers. And that's another thing that they don't talk about that was really prevalent in the Civil War, was that lice were very bad. And another thing was that in the heat of the South, there was no getting away from bugs, all kinds of bugs. Spiders, mosquitoes were horrific. And everybody was infested with lice, which can also carry disease. And women would, at this point, they would put like flowers on their dresses to try and ward off the stench. Like, they stunk so bad. And the way that the way they bathed was basically what a friend of mine calls a PTNA bath, which is pits, boobs, and butt. I'm not going to say it the way it is. And that's how women were, the only way women were allowed to bathe. And they had to have somebody watching So they would keep their dresses on and sit in this little kind of like a toilet seat sort of a thing. And so that's why corsages became popular, was actually because they would wear flowers to try and keep the smell of themselves from making people sick. So the city held out against the Union forces until late June. And then on July 4th, 1863, the Confederates of Vicksburg surrendered, and the American flag was raised above the Vicksburg courthouse rather than the Confederate flag. And this is an interesting part of that. July 4th would not be celebrated as a holiday in Vicksburg for another 81 years, which means that they did not celebrate the 4th of July until 1945 in Vicksburg, Mississippi. These people held a grudge.
Crybabies.
They held a grudge. They were not having it. They were not, which is interesting because if you look at the political landscape and how things kind of play out, and you look at the history and how, they considered they were invaded. The woman who took us on the tour of the McRaven House was just flat out pissed. She was pissed. She didn't want to celebrate 4th of July to this day. She was just so angry. And when you think about it, her ancestors came from there. They'd have these stories passed down about being forced to eat rats because, they had a stronghold and they were going to strangle the shit out of this town. And if they had to starve to death, then so be it. And so, there's some resentment. There's some resentment over there.
Get over it. I'm sorry. You were America before and you're America now. Get over it.
Well, at some point, you got to say, guess what? We lost the war.
Well, even then, you're American before the Civil War. You're American after the Civil War. Your ancestors fought for their independence from Britain. Get over it.
Right.
You're American. Celebrate 4th of July. Or you could get out of this country, foreigner.
I can understand not celebrating the 4th of July for a little bit because, you'd be mad. And it's not like the Union Army went anywhere. They did hang around. Some of them brought their families, so they're like, and you didn't even get the F out of here. So, take a minute and, it's going to be weird. But when you think about that war, it was brother against brother, so there were relatives. And you just it was a difference of a fundamental belief. That's what the war was about. The difference in a fundamental belief. And this lady was mad. It was really weird. I was like, I felt really uncomfortable. I thought she was going to break out a Confederate flag and then perhaps beat me up. And she was like, so where are you originally from? Mississippi? Georgia?
Texas?
Yeah. I was like, I was from Washington State. I'm sorry. Can we go now? So I wanted to say that last week I talked about the Vicksburg, the Battle of Vicksburg, and the fact that it's like a federal park area now, and you can drive through it. And I was mentioning how you can see the ravines and what the area was like. that you could hide down in a ravine and just shoot people coming over the top of it like they were fish in a barrel, because the woods were very, very thick. It was very hilly. It was just an interesting place. And then they have these houses that are just right out in the middle of the battlefield, just there, which is strange. And so you drive around, you can see these areas where, either side would hide, and they would tell you who held on to this section, and, was it Confederate or was it Union? And then I was talking about how you would go on this ship that was a warship. And if Jeremy puts those pictures up, these are all my photos. So you're inside the ship, which is sort of like a skeleton of the ship. You can put your hand on the wood. And when you look out to your left, there is a huge, huge area that goes and goes and goes and goes as far as the eye can see. And they have little white headstones. Sometimes there's just a rock there. And I looked up the amount of people who had been killed, the Union soldiers who were unidentified, to this day, unidentified. And they ranged in age from children, 12 or 13-year-old boys, to, obviously grown men. And it was 17,000. 17,000 Union soldiers are buried there without names. And talk about profound pain. Just you have the war aspect, and you're walking on these grounds that were literally soaked in blood. These trees that are growing up literally grew through blood. And then they have this whole section, 17,000. Even identified soldiers would be profound enough. But 17,000 young boys and men whose family didn't know where they ended up, what battle they died in, or how they died, is profoundly sad and emotional. And I've never felt anything like that before in my life. And what I did like was people going through the tours. There wasn't any of the, like, hey, let's take a picture next to this and smile. Everybody felt it. It was a feeling that wouldn't allow for you. I felt like, to be in that kind of a, hey, this is awesome, kind of a mode. And like I said last week, if anybody can go or happens to be going through Vicksburg, Mississippi for whatever reason, do go here, because it will give you a different view on war and what it looks like and feels like. 17,000 unidentified men and boys. It's amazing. And that's just in this spot. That's not even the whole South. That's one city. And it's one side. It was the Unions. So all the Confederate soldiers too, Anyway, now that I've made everybody grab a drink, I'm going to talk about my experience at the McRaven House. So I'll tell you about the McRaven House first, okay? This is perhaps the most famous haunted place in Vicksburg. The house was used as the Union headquarters during the occupation of the city. The house was used by Colonel Wilson, who Grant replaced in charge of the federal troops, and a Captain McPherson, a former resident of the city. McPherson served as the liaison between the occupying troops and the residents of the town. Now imagine, you're occupying troops in a town that doesn't want you there. The anger, the hatred, the resentment was real. McPherson served as, okay, so liaison. One night, McPherson failed to return from his usual rounds, and he was declared missing. A search was started, but the young man was not found. One night later, McPherson returned, although not in his flesh. His mutilated-looking apparition appeared in the McRaven house. The ghost was dripping with water and was bloody. He materialized to Colonel Wilson, and he told his commander that he had been murdered by Confederate sympathizers and thrown into the river. They ended up actually finding him in the exact same shape that the colonel said that he appeared to him in. Since that time, the ghost has continued to appear, bearing the same message to other occupants of the house. The ghost of Captain McPherson is not alone. There have been sightings of a woman with long brown hair and a plain dress in the middle bedroom of the home. She has been seen by a number of reputable witnesses. There have also been sightings of Civil War soldiers walking about the house. In 1991, the house became a private residence, but it was actually a private residence for quite a while, and it was blessed by an Episcopal priest, but the spirits never left. So let me tell you a little bit more about this house. This house is built in multiple stages. It was built in the 1600s as a dirt floor, tiny little space. It was used by thieves, crooks, as sort of a hideout. Then they built a larger space on, and that was built in the 1700s, and that was more of a wealthy-ish sort of house, but still not like super wealthy. And then they used the first part of the house that had been built. They used that as the kitchen. And then in the 1800s, it was built on again. In the 1900s, it was built on again, and it became this huge mansion. It does not have closets because closets were taxed as rooms. So it's this huge house without any kind of closet. The master bedroom, which is in the newest part of the house, had this little tiny room off to the side. And by tiny, I mean it's probably 3 foot by 3 foot, where the master of the home, he got dressed and groomed himself, and the woman of the home was allowed to use the bedroom for that. So before they got ready for bed, he would get into his sleeping gown, and she would get into hers, and then she would slip into bed real quick, and then call him in, and then he was allowed to enter the room. This particular room, our tour guide was telling us that. And we went twice. We went one during the day to hear the historical features of the house, and then we went at night for the ghost tour. So the woman during the day was the angry woman. The woman at night was not. So she was saying that during a tour, there was a man who sat down at this little seat, and he was talking out loud. And when he would ask a yes or no question, the window would vibrate, like it would like tap once or twice, ta-ta, or ta. And that they all had gathered around and they asked questions, and the window would answer these yes or no questions. 1 for yes, 2 for no. So we were standing in this outside of this little space because you can only go in like one at a time to look at it. And we had walked out. My husband stayed back, and my husband, as I've said here many times, is a skeptic, although he does believe. He has seen things, experienced things, saw me being scratched and whatnot. So he does believe. He is just still skeptical, which is, Rob and I were actually talking this morning about the fact that it's funny because I am as well, and so is Rob. So we walked into the adjoining bedroom, and my husband said, "It's doing it." And I walked out, and the tour guide walked out with me, and he would ask yes or no questions, and the window would tap once or twice. And so we got to experience that, and then we didn't stick around. He wasn't in the mood to go ahead and stick around for that. The house has a dark feeling. There were two sisters who lived in the house for a long time, a very long time. They boarded up the house, and they lived in this middle area of the house, which was the dining room. But they put a bed down there, and they lived there alone. And the only person that saw them was their doctor, and they had a grocery store that would deliver them food. Eventually, one of the sisters died. The other sister did then agree to leave the house. And when she sold it, she instructed that it must be used as a residence or as in remembrance of what had happened in the home. So it is owned by a private owner now, a man and his wife, who took it upon themselves to refurbish this house, and they're using period pieces so that it stays the way it was then. It was also owned by the French family, who you might know because of French's mustard. The inventor of that owned the house for quite a while. It is said that his ghost appears in the home, and he claimed to see ghosts. There's a bedroom where one of the owners of the home, who had done an addition to this house, had put this bedroom on for his new bride. She was a 15-year-old girl, which was often done back then. Often families who were more middle class would marry their brides to wealthier men to ensure that they wouldn't fall to poverty. And I told this story several weeks ago about the meaning of being born with a silver spoon in your mouth. She became pregnant, and in case you guys don't remember, the meaning of the term being born with a silver spoon in your mouth is because when women would become pregnant, they had pretty high odds that they wouldn't survive the birth. So to ensure that their child would have wealth after their passing, in case their father married a woman who didn't want to be bothered by another woman's child, they would melt down all of their metal, their jewelry, tea sets, and whatnot, and make silver spoons out of them, so that it was hard cash. They could always sell a spoon for money to live off of the silver, and that's what being born with a silver spoon in your mouth means. Well, this woman died in childbirth, and her room is dark and foreboding. They have her bed in there. They have her original bedding. They have her furniture in there. And she's said to be seen looking out of a window. There's also a woman that's seen in this room who wears her hair high on a bun and wears a very plain dress. So if Jeremy can show you, I was taking a lot of photos in this house. They were all clear, except for this one picture. And I took this picture, and it was blurry. But what is striking about the picture is that standing in the doorway next to this girl, this woman, she's a girl, really, her dresser, is the formation of a woman who appears to be wearing a plain black or dark dress and has her hair in a bun. And of course, I didn't see that until I got home. And I did write on the online registry and send them the picture. I've also written a story about the McRaven House that is a fictional story, but based on some of the stories that we learned of the history. So we went outside, and the land I mentioned last week was not only a Civil War battlefield, but it is on the Trail of Tears. There were many, 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 many people buried on this land. And if Jeremy could put up the picture I promised I was going to put up, there's a picture where they have on the wall the instruments that they used to amputate. They have some bones that are found on the property. They continue to excavate this land to find as many bones as possible to try and save this last place of burial for people, and be able to put them somewhere peaceful. Mostly, well, Union soldiers, obviously, of many, many legs and arms amputated. And then for the most part, the rest is American Indian women and children, or the elderly, who were unable to continue on the trail. If the woman was pregnant, started out on the trail pregnant, and ended up delivering, oftentimes there was no care given to these women, and they could pass away, and they would leave the infant because they didn't want a burden on the trail. It was hard enough without bringing an infant and no way to feed them. So the property has a very, very dark history. And Jeremy can put up the pictures that there are pictures that you see that I've taken in the house where you can see outside and the night is clear. Earlier, where you saw the pictures of the burial at the battlefield, there's not even a cloud in the sky. There's no humidity. There's no smoke. But I couldn't get a single picture to turn out that wasn't misty on this property. And I believe that is the feeling you get when you're on that property. You can't move around without feeling the thickness in the air and the heaviness and the weight of this home and the lives that were lost and placed in the ground there. So, sorry if it bored you to tears, but like I said last week, if you ever go to Vicksburg, Mississippi, be sure and go to the McRaven House. Tell them Exit Light sent you, because I've gotten several views on my McRaven House story. So I'm pretty sure they know I've written one about them. And we met the owners, and interesting is we met the owner while we were there, and he was walking from the back of the property, and in his hand he had a musket ball and a finger, the bones for a finger in his hand. And he said that they had actually just been, it had been raining several weeks before that. And he said whenever it rains, they wait, and then they go out, and oftentimes bones rise up to the top. And he went out and found that. And that was, I just can't even imagine that aspect. So that is my final story about Civil War hauntings, and I hope you enjoyed that. Jory, did I put you to sleep?
No, I'm very much alive.
Okay. Vicksburg is beautiful. If you ever go, just go for the beauty too, because it is beautiful. And like I said, it's right across the river from Louisiana, which is, stone's throw across, which is really interesting. The downtown is very old-fashioned, yet it is buzzing with people. It is a tourist place, but they kept the old way it was built. So the shops are very, very nice, but on the outside they still look like, like an old Victorian, downtown. But that's it. There you go. There's my own personal photos, my experience there, and my Civil War ghost. So what do you guys think? Did you see the ghost? Did you like that? Anybody? Crickets? Jory? I know, did you feel like I just took you on a ghost tour?
Yeah. It was a good story.
Thank you. I love history. So I could talk on and on and on. Mad Meerkat says, loved every minute. Thanks for another good one. You're very welcome. Joy, do you have anything else, or are you done?
I was just going to add a small note to the Pennsylvania Hall story.
Okay.
There's also the spirit of a boy who appears blue with the female dorms. And his story is supposedly that these girls had found and this was in the 1800s, these girls had found a lost boy, took him up into their dorm and were feeding him and taking care of him. Well, they weren't allowed to have a boy in the dorm. And when the headmistress came in to check on him, they had him hide outside the window. Well, this was wintertime, and it was on one of the higher level floors. And when the headmistress checked on him, she needed them for a chore. So the boy ended up staying outside longer than intended and passed away. And so people claim to this day to see the face, like the ghost of a blue-faced boy staring in their window, trying to get into the dorm, even though the window's like 4 stories off the ground.
Wow.
Yeah. Just a little side note about that building.
Well, I loved doing this podcast. This was Jory's idea because we're going into Veterans Day. And so he wanted to do this podcast in remembrance of Veterans Day here.
Yeah, we got Veterans Day coming up. It's also Madison's birthday, so I thought it'd be cool to do a Civil War ghost story. Civil War is one of my favorite topics in history, both from the practical side of it and the paranormal side of it. So I thought it'd be fun to talk about.
Yeah, mine too. I really find it super fascinating. So if you are listening to this on my channel and not live, and you are not subscribed, please do. I am super close to hitting 1,500 subscribers, and that would be awesome because when I very first started this channel, my goal was this is how low my bar was. I just wanted 1,500 subscribers. I was just like, if I can just get 1,500 subscribers, then I'll know that there's people listening to what I write and what I have to say. And good night, Steve. Sleep well. It's so late where you are. Thank you for showing up. Bye. Say goodbye to Mad Meerkat, Jor.
Good night, Mad Meerkat.
So please subscribe. Go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. It's how I am recommended, which is how I can have new subscribers, and I'm deemed not worthy of monetization. So if it is within your heart to support our channel, my channel, and our podcasts, then please do so through Patreon. Consider doing so through there or Teespring. And Rob is designing a Christmas design for me right now to put on a new sweatshirt for the Teespring store. And I'm excited about it. Also, click that bell so that you can be notified of my new content and when I go live. And I am sorry, you guys, that I have been very inactive in the last week, but my brain came to a screeching halt after 31 videos. It was like, that's it, I'm out of here. So I'm actually working on 2 stories right now. So they're coming. And thank you, Jeremy, for producing this. And like I said, you guys, if you're interested in a producer or a graphic design artist, please keep Jeremy in mind because he's very talented. So thank you to moderator Maya and my moderator Josh, who had to step in for a little while today. And of course, as always, to you guys for coming, and I hope you really enjoyed this. I loved it. And to you, Jory, thank you for coming.
Well, as always, thank you for having me on. It was fun.
I'm glad. Next week, Rob and I are going to be doing the mysterious disappearances in the United States National Parks. And hello, Dor. And what's happening? Why are people going missing without a trace? Bigfoot and chupacabras. The end. Wouldn't that be funny if we just started off like that? People are going missing. Why? Bigfoot, chupacabras. Thanks for coming. No chupacabras, though. Those are fake. Jory.
Yes.
What are you doing?
Sorry, Kendra came in here and was talking to me. I apologize.
Are you going to be here next week to listen to the podcast, Jory, and sit in the chat?
I will definitely try. I don't have any plans right now, so.
All right. If that is all, good night.
Good night.